The USGA, and we're working with other organizations to try to use some of the technology that Matt has talked to you about to make some changes in golf course maintenance and do it in a way that's palatable to you. And in the process, makes the game more fun, not quite as expensive to play, and conserves on resources. So that's the idea, if I can figure this part of it out. Okay, here's the challenge. And this stuff you already know. There's not like, no offense to Matt, but this is going to be easier for you to understand because it's all common sense. And when I'm through, you're going to say, well, gosh, we already knew that, and I'll apologize ahead of it. But the thing that I'm trying to do is present this in a way that makes you take it back to your course and sell it to other people that may not be as in tune with what's going on as you are. The first thing we're trying to do is conserve. We're trying to conserve money. We're trying to conserve water. Now, I know water's not as big an issue in New Jersey as it is for a lot of the rest of the country, but it is unbelievably huge everywhere west of the Mississippi, and it's coming your way. And I'm telling you, it's no longer an agronomic issue. It's not even a supply issue. It's a political issue. All right, people are scared to death about where water's going to come from, and they're arguing over who owns it and how much it's going to cost and how much are they going to get. And so it's coming your way. It may not be tomorrow, but you will be dealing with the issue soon, just like I have to now. At the same time, we're trying to preserve. And what we're trying to preserve is pace of play and playing quality. Now, I will tell you that two of the challenges that I work with so much are the cost of taking care of a golf course and the availability of water. And for one of the few times in my 30 years with the green section, these two challenges actually complement one another. Because it turns out, and we put 30 years of green section research, about $30 million into turfgrass research, and come to find out, if you don't water grass very much, it doesn't grow a whole lot. Now, who would have dreamt that? And so, and it turns out, if it doesn't grow a whole lot, you don't have to mow it a whole lot. If you don't mow it a whole lot, you don't have to pay for a lot of labor, you don't have to pay for a lot of fuel, and so they actually complement one another. So a lot of things that we would do right in terms of conserving water also help in conserving money. So, two of the most commonly cited reasons for not playing more golf, you all know these certainly better than I do. It takes too long, it's too expensive, and you can see the graph from the National Golf Foundation. The most serious environmental issue that's facing the game right now is water and golf's consumption of water. People are scared to death when they see those big old sprinklers running out there. They don't recognize that probably more water is being wasted by home lawn irrigation systems than was ever thought of being wasted on a golf course, but they don't see the little bitty heads out there running at 0.5 gallons a minute somehow just don't look the same as that big head that's pumping 90 gallons a minute out. So here's the dilemma that we're facing on the maintenance side. Many of the steps that can be initiated to improve pace of play, and Matt's made a good presentation and you all know what needs to be done. These are some of the things that superintendents can do to improve pace of play. They can maintain a uniform stand of grass, they can mow roughs lower, they can mow roughs more often, they can keep everything free of leaves and debris, you can reduce the density of trees and understory. Players always have priority. We never ask you to wait on a maintenance task. We do more in less time. We get out there earlier with more people if we can, and we perform maintenance in non-play hours. So all those things make sense. The problem is, every one of them costs more money. So there's that conflict. We've got a nice cooperative effort between water and cost, but when it comes to pace of play and cost, we're in direct conflict with each other. So what we're trying to do is figure out a way to solve this problem. And for years, golf course superintendents and green section agronomists have proposed a simple solution to this problem. Change the way we build and maintain golf courses. Brad, pay close attention, please. Eliminate all trees, bunkers, and roughs. Entire course slopes with a centrally located drain. Green speeds not to exceed 6 feet. Mow the entire place with a 30-foot wide mower. And we've actually successfully implemented this strategy. Unfortunately, they're called sod farms, and y'all don't seem to be real thrilled about playing these things. And so one of the other stats that comes out is golfers expect very high-quality conditions when they play. So sod farms aren't going to work. Converting from a simplified maintenance program like this, where they may only have 2 types of roughs, to one where they involve maybe 4 types of roughs. Maybe they have 3 different levels of bunker maintenance. Maybe the bunker that's to the right of number 1 fairway that nobody gets into except the squirrels and the deer. Maybe that one doesn't get raked 7 days a week. Maybe the one next to the green, which at a lower budget golf course where they're only able to maybe rake that one next to the green 3 times a week because they're maintaining all the bunkers 3 times a week. We shift the maintenance away from the bunkers that don't come into play very often and focus them on the ones that do. That's the whole concept that we're trying to sell. Now, this is an actual golf course that I work with. The numbers are awful small, I know. And I just want to show you two scenarios and show you why this is important. They have 80 acres of roughs. They're maintaining them at two levels. And like I said, I know the numbers are small. What I really want you to understand is if we look at the 6 resources that the USGA is focusing on, we're focusing on labor, fuel, energy, fertilizer, pesticides, and water. Because if you look at any maintenance budget, those are going to be the big 6. Now, you're not going to save that much money on flowers at the clubhouse. First thing you're going to look at is labor. So if you look at the resources that they're consuming there, the total resource cost for their 80 acres of roughs is roughly $74,000 or $74,000. But more importantly, for this course, they're spending 60 acre feet of water a year. Now, their total allocation of water per year is 300 acre feet. They could be willing to spend, if you're a country club in this town, you may have all the money in the world, but you're not going to get more than 300 acre feet. Because the city's going to say, we can't tell people in this town that they can't take baths anymore or have water to drink or wash their cars when the country club's getting water just because you're willing to pay for it. That's what I mean about the politics coming into it. Now, if we go to scenario 2, well, we still have 80 acres of roughs, but now we're adding areas that don't require near as much maintenance. And more importantly, and for this course, it doesn't require near as much water. We saved 20 acre feet of water just by changing the way the course is maintained. And as I said, y'all would say, well, that's just common sense. Why would you do it this way? Well, golfers are scared to death of it. Now here, again, as I said, you guys have seen it for years. But in my part of the world, the standard way of maintaining a golf course is basically mow everything in sight. And there's a couple of superintendents in the room I know, and I know they haven't always been at top clubs. They probably, like I did, started with small courses, and I can tell you that if you don't have much money, what you do is you mow with the biggest mower you can, and you mow everything in sight. That's how you save money. And that's the standard way that golf courses have been built in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and even the early 2000s. We built golf courses that were made to be mowed, were made to be irrigated, made to be fertilized, made for you to see an awful lot of grass and never have to look for a ball. So, just by changing how the roughs are maintained on this course, you can see the savings for yourself. And as I said, for us, saving 6.5 million gallons of water just in the roughs is amazing. Now, how are these numbers calculated? This is where it gets interesting. And how can we convince owners, managers, and players that we can make these changes without this happening? This is what scares them to death. Well, as I always say, I would like to tell you that I bought this book and I read it, and that's not true. I looked it up on the internet. It seemed like a pretty cool book, and it had a great saying that is very pertinent to my talk, so I'm trying to, honesty here. Measurement is the first step that leads to control and eventually improvement. If you can't measure something, you can't understand it. And if you can't understand it, you can't control it. If you can't control it, you can't improve it. And I can't see how anybody could argue with any of those. So we're taking these little loggers. When Matt first showed me what he was doing, what did you tell me? You told me I was like a kid in a candy shop. Because he's looking at golfers and I'm looking at maintenance. And I'm thinking, God, this is a sales tool of all sales tools that we can use, that people on my side of the business can use to convince people on your side of the fence that we can make these changes without hurt the play. So yes, we're tracking players. I refer to these guys not very affectionately as the cheaters. These are people that I play golf with who've never heard of the USGA gym system. They make up their own handicaps, apparently, because they take my money all the time. But anyhow, we track them. We ask them to carry these things. But we also put it on maintenance equipment. And we find out a lot of information by seeing how maintenance equipment moves to the golf course. And you would be amazed, most of you, if you've never seen what goes on a golf course before about 8 o'clock, before you come out, I think you would be flabbergasted to see how many miles are being traveled out there just to get that course ready for the day's play. There's an awful lot going on right there, and that's just 2 holes. All right, by following what the maintenance staff is doing, and I have a hard time seeing it here, we get accurate measurement of maintained area. This allows us to calculate the resources. If I know how long it takes Mark's guy that's sitting on an out front mower to mow an acre, and I measure the amount of fuel that he consumes in the process of mowing that acre, then I can start doing calculations and I ask Mark, I said, Mark, how much water are you putting, how many inches of water are you putting down a year in this area? Mark's going to tell me, of course, being a good superintendent, he's going to say it depends, and I know that. But we're working with averages, all right? We have to start somewhere. Interaction between golfers and maintenance staff. This is really an eye-opener. We can start with between the loggers on the golfers and the loggers on the equipment. We can find out where they're intersecting. Maybe it's time to change the route that we're taking care of a golf course. Golf course superintendents instinctively pick the route for their maintenance equipment that gets them through the golf course in the shortest direction, in the shortest amount of miles traveled. Not necessarily what interacts with players as much. And this is harder on a heavily played golf course than it would be a private country club, even though I know some private country clubs are heavily played. But you're talking about a municipal golf course that I play that gets 50,000 rounds a year. This becomes intersections like this cause big slowdowns in play. More efficient mowing patterns. You might be surprised to know that if you mow fairways like you see the blue pattern on the left there, Mark, if you don't mind me, what would you call that mowing pattern in this part of the world?
I'm sorry.
A stadium cut. I mean, some people refer to that as a stadium cut. The old way we used to mow fairways, we just mowed in big circles. Yeah, and now a lot of guys like to mow the stripes. They're pretty. Most of y'all like the stripes. I can tell you, and not just me, the Toro company will tell you it consumes 10% more fuel to mow those stripes. It'll take about 10% longer to mow those stripes. They're pretty, but they're costly. All right, these are the kind of things that we intuitively knew before, but we couldn't measure it. Now we measure it very accurately. And then the advantages of more efficient equipment. I spent probably the first 20 years of my career trying to convince every golf course that would listen to me to get rid of the triplex mowers and go to hand mowers, because every good club you ever went to was out there mowing greens by hand. It's been a long time since you turned a television on and watched a golf course that was mowed with a triplex mower. Triplex mowing equipment has gotten much, much better. The engineers of the world have made big progress here, and surprisingly, a triplex mower is about 3 times faster than a single head mower. Okay. I knew to get into engineering, it just goes down. All right. My point is, though, we're finding out we can again measure if that bigger piece of equipment that maybe your club has not been thinking, or that newer piece of equipment that's $45,000, $50,000, $60,000 that maybe you think you couldn't afford, it might be that it actually saves you quite a bit of money over a year's time because of its efficiency. Okay, so we place the loggers on the golfers. We can determine a lot of aspects of golf course usage, including where they're going and where they're not going, which roughs, which bunkers, which hazards come into play. A lot. Those are the ones that we need to spend our resources in, assuming that we have limited resources, which many courses do. Which course features result in a slowing of play? Where are they spending a lot of time? You know, if there's a rough that's just to the right of number 2, let me tell you a real typical scenario that happens to a superintendent. You got enough people on your crew, if the weather's normal, you mow the right rough on number 2 on Monday, and you're not going to get back around to it until the following Monday. You may only be able to roll that, because of the limits in your crew, you may be able to mow that rough only once a week. Well, everything's fine, except if it rains the following Monday. And now it's too wet to get in the rough on Monday, and it's too wet to get back there on Tuesday, and by Wednesday, you've got US Open rough. All right, so, and y'all are all mad, and rightly so, because play's slowed down. So what we're trying to tell these intermediate or low-budget clubs is that let us help you figure out which roughs come into play a lot. And the ones that don't, we're not going to spend time mowing those. We're going to get it to where you can mow roughs that come into play 2 or 3 times a week within the confines of your existing budget. Where are they getting stuck waiting on maintenance staff? Where a restroom is badly needed? You'd be surprised what shows up with the GPS devices. There's always a very popular tree on the golf course for some reason by the men golfers, I'm not sure. Traffic problems. It's hard for you to see the green, I think, and you see the cart path, but that's a very typical design of golf courses constructed in the 80s and 90s. The path comes up, takes a left turn, heads off to the next tee. When we put the loggers on players, you find out that every single player, no matter where that superintendent puts the whole location that day, every single player is going to come in and out of that green. If you call the bottom of the green or the front of the green 6 o'clock, every single player is coming in and out about 8 o'clock, no matter where the whole location is. So once we know this, all we have to do is extend this cart path around to the back of that green before we turn left to the next tee. And now we'll be able to bring people in at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and we'll be able to save a lot of wear and tear on greens just from traffic. So to test our new maintenance scheme before we put it into effect, one of the things I really like about this is when I'm trying to convince a course to change the way they're taking care of the property, to establish naturalized areas, to quit taking care of some areas altogether, or to maybe increase maintenance in other areas, we want to test it before we go out and do all this, because these changes are not cheap, they're not quick, and they're not easy. What I mean by that is in some cases, a course will actually have to change the plant materials in some of these areas that we want to take out of maintenance. They may have been originally planted to bent grass. In my part of the world, they may have been planted to hybrid or bent grass. Well, bent grass and hybrid permitted grass don't turn into love grass overnight. Somebody's got to kill it off and bring in the new plant material, so that's expensive, all right? So we want to test these things before we do it. So what we do is we start, let me go back one, and you see this neck, you see R1 and R2, and about 50 yards down that fairway, you see that neck. That looks pretty good on paper. And everybody says, okay, it's a reasonable idea, but let's start tracking our players and see what happens. And obviously, that's a bad idea. What that's going to do is going to result in a bottleneck. And so before we ever even make these changes, we can test our hypotheses and go back and alter our plans. And just being able to do this helps us sell these ideas so much better. It gets people to try it. I've been out to the desert courses a couple of times and getting ready to go back. A lot of courses out there have done what you're seeing here. Matt showed a picture. You've seen them on TV where they don't even have grass in the ruts. They don't have grass around the tees. They can't afford to spend water on it. They've had to do that because they just didn't have the water, but what they're worried about, what the owners and the managers and the leadership are worried about, did we make these changes correctly on our golf course? So we go out there with the loggers, we track their players, we find out where they're going, and we can either validate what they've done, or we can offer suggestions to make some changes to the facility. So we take a course that right now is doing this, and we try to get them to consider to do this. And when I suggest this to somebody, and I'm not an architect, ideally what this course would do, if they could afford it, would go hire a professional architect to come in and find these areas and lay them out for them. That would be wonderful. If they can't do that, they can use their own estimation. They know their golf course pretty well, and when they lay the players on there, you find out that those big green areas that I had on there, there's a few of them that need adjustment, but for the most part, there's a lot of potential to save a lot of resources on this course. All right, one other thing I want to show you that we are doing wrong through most of the country. This is another one of these things that you're just going to say, how stupid have y'all been? Irrigation complexes at many golf courses are unbelievably inefficient. And this is another course, the same course I'm working with, Cottonwood Creek Golf Course. It happens to be in my hometown. They're my test center. It's a wonderfully run city golf course. The city of Waco is an honest broker in terms of trying to lead the citizenship of this town, which is about 200,000 people. They're trying to lead by example, do as we do, not do as we say. They're trying to do the right thing. They have 73 tees. You can see the kind of little green areas. I'll zoom in on one. Very typical system for golf courses built, other than maybe the last 5 or 7 years in drought-stricken parts of the country. They have the tee complexes that you're seeing right there. These are the irrigation heads, the little pinpoints. I go out and mark them with my GPS device. I know the engineering data on the irrigation heads. I've also measured them myself. That's the irrigation coverage of that tee complex, all right, including the road. All right, now, as I said earlier, if you water grass, it grows. This is the mower. All right, that's the mower track, because and if you happen to look closely, and it's a little hard for you all to see probably, if you look at the shade of grass that's around the green areas that I have, the bright green areas, if you notice the shade of the grass there, and then as you get out to the cart on the right, you notice how it's a different shade. What you're looking at out where the cart is on the right, not the one on the left of the cart, but to the right, that's buffalo grass. The area around the greens is Bermuda grass, which uses about 3 or 4 times more water than buffalo grass. The buffalo grass won't creep into the Bermuda grass unless it's as long as it's Bermuda grass won't creep into the buffalo grass as long as it's not irrigated out in the buffalo grass area. So if you look at that shading, and then if you look where the sprinklers are hitting, you can see how perfectly they match up. All right. So the high water use grass is growing in the irrigated area, whereas the low water use grass is not. And of course, we're having to mow and fertilize and pest control and everything else in this area that we're irrigating. You multiply this times 18 tees, it adds up a bunch. In fact, in this course, they have 84,000 square feet of tee surface. They're irrigating 937,000 square feet of turf grass. That's less than 9% efficient. They're using 35 acre feet of water, 120 gallons of diesel, 251 labor hours. All of these can be reduced by 90% just by changing the way that we irrigate tee complexes. And I see you shaking your head, and I hope it's because it's like, how can you all not know that? But I'm just telling you, this is what we're having to change the way we do business. Now, on this course, we're changing these tees right now. I am trying to convince the city, said, let us change a couple and wait a year, because I want you to see how ugly this area is going to be when we're through. The tee tops are going to be gorgeous. Around the tees is gonna be ugly. It's no longer gonna be very fine leaf Bermuda grass. It's free of weeds. It's gonna have every plant you can think of, some of them who don't like you. Alright? And ideally, we'd be able to go strip that out and spend a bunch of the city's money to put in a low water use plant like buffalo grass, or we use some of the beautiful plants that you have here, or we go out in the desert with desert plants. But most courses don't have that resource. So what we're trying to do is to come up with ways to gradually transition these areas from a high water use plant to a water use plant, to a low water use plant. This would be great if everybody would start out like this. This is Barton Creek in Austin. You can see the very small little irrigation heads on top of the tee. Makes all the sense in the world. They did this from the get-go. You have Texas plants, you know, indigenous to this part of the state, that they planted out there from the beginning. This is more typical of what most courses are going to look like. They're going to go from being real pretty and green to being brown and ugly. It's great. And I'm very proud of what the USGA is doing. I tell you, I've been on staff, as I said, almost 30 years. I'm sure Matt feels the same way. I don't think there's ever been a more exciting time to be on the USGA staff, and it's because of these issues and the fact that we feel like we can make a difference. And so, and having a chance to speak to groups like this is a big part of our program. So thank you very much for the opportunity.